To conclude this first of what will probably be 3 sidebars, and to bring us back around to the subject of drilling target structures, I'm going to address the topic of pushing ARMP, authentic, rhythm, melody, and pronunciation. The ways in which the sound system of English contrasts with that of Japanese lie at the heart of a lot of the problems that Japanese learners face. Take this sentence. If you showed it, just like this, as text, to any Japanese business person, he or she would pretty easily understand its meaning. But if you spoke it, if I had known you were sick, I would have visited you, there is a good chance that he or she would not know for sure that you are expressing a past counterfactual conditional. He or she would probably recognize it as a conditional, but to his or her ear, you are just as likely to have spoken a future conditional. Or a present hypothetical conditional. The problem is not that this Japanese business person has not learned the grammar. He or she studied it for at least 6 years. But let's look at that school experience. It's very common for Japanese kids to read aloud in katakana pronunciation. That is, English spoken as if it were written in katakana Japanese characters. So if our business person were to try to pronounce this sentence, it would have to sound like this. If I had known you were sick, I would have visited you. If you want kids to be able to speak any but the most simple English sentences, you need to break them of this habit. If you study linguistics, you can study phonology for months. You don't have to so much teach the kids about English phonology. Probably you shouldn't. And you shouldn't have any illusions that after 1 hour with you, you will have completely naturalized their pronunciation. What you are doing here is establishing that you expect from the kids an effort to use authentic sounding English. You want to communicate that mumbling to you in katakana is not acceptable. So, in all pedagogy decisions, you need to pick your battles. For example, I myself have a method for teaching R and L, because occasionally, when I teach business clients, they ask for it. But when it comes to teaching junior high school and high school, I find it's not so profitable to focus on R and L so much. In the work that I have done over the years with Japanese junior high school and high school kids, these are the key points that I have been able to get the most mileage out of. I will list them in order of priority. 1. English is a stress-timed language, while Japanese is a syllable-timed language. Again, this is not something that you should try to teach explicitly. All you need to do is show it. Sister Sally. My mother named my sister Sally. Excellent! The doctor called the monster Frankenstein. S-V-O-C. The doctor called the monster Frankenstein. This is something that is fairly consistent across English dialects. Basically, a native English-speaking listener will have an easier time following your argument if you keep the spaces between your stressed syllables between 0.75 and 1.5 seconds apart. 2. The 4 vocal inflections. Interrogative, you do. Penultimate, and so. Inert, I have a dream. And declarative. You do. Declarative inflections are important because they communicate confidence and signal that you know that you have completed a unified idea. The interrogative inflection is for, of course, questions, but also we use them for lists, as in, I'd like a red one, a blue one, and a green one. The penultimate inflection and the inert inflection grammatically have the same role in the sentence. We use them when we are in the middle of an idea, In other words, we use them to communicate that we aren't quite finished yet. But the inert inflection, the Martin Luther King singing sort of inflection, is used in formal situations when you want to communicate dramatically, and the penultimate inflection sounds more friendly. 3. Relative pitch. The range of pitches within a particular English sentence tend to be a lot wider than is typical in the case of Japanese.
Can be.
No, it can't. An argument is a connected series of statements to establish a definite proposition.
No, it isn't.
This is particularly important when it comes to forming non-restrictive relative clauses. Typically, a subordinate clause or a parenthetical expression will be given a lower pitch so as to set it off from the main clause. My brother, who lives in Thailand, is a doctor. 4. Reductions. Did you eat yet? What do you want to do? You want to go to the movies? 5. Phoneme retraining. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound that can make a difference in changing the meaning of a word. R and L is the funniest error that falls under this heading. And before your student goes and testifies before the U.S. Congress, you'll want to straighten that out. But there are many other phoneme pronunciation problems that will give you more mileage than R and L. The difference between she and she, the difference between want and won't. Would is a very semantically important word that is excruciatingly difficult for Japanese speakers to pronounce. The reason for this being that the Japanese language has a much more limited range of consonant-vowel possibilities than in the case of English. In the case of W, there is wa, wo, but no wu. So this word often gets pronounced uto. So you get aiudo, raiku, zato. 6. Coarticulation. Consonants change depending on the environment of other sounds that they occur in. Take this sentence. Keep the cap on the cup in the car. The K, or hard C, is a velar consonant, which puts it anywhere on the soft palate, that is, anywhere between the hard palate, where the K becomes Ch, and the uvula, where K becomes the Semitic Ch sound, as in the words halal or hasidim. So in the case of keep the cap on the cup in the car, the tongue makes contact with the soft palate at a slightly different spot depending on which vowels are in its vicinity. So not only do you need to be teaching the difference between T and TH and D and Z and S and SH and B and V and those kinds of things, but you also need to be building awareness of how a single consonant can sound different in different contexts. So to try to tie things off, this third part of the sidebar about pushing for ARMP has to do with the fact that just getting the kids to grunt back at you might be a good start if you are starting from zero, and a lot of times you are. But eventually, you need to think carefully about giving the kids the tools they need to make sense to native speakers, which will also help them to make sense of native speakers, who do say things like, what do you want to do? You want to go to the movies. Language is, after all, fundamentally about sound. Not caring what the language sounds like would be like teaching music to somebody using only sheet music. Anyway, that's enough about creating a culture of response. Let's move on from this sidebar and back to the central discussion we are having in this series about drilling target structures. Right before I interrupted myself with this sidebar, I was talking about drilling techniques and focusing on shadowing, which I likened to the concept of a rattle. Now we are going to move on to the next metaphor, Legos, and discuss the concept of patterning.